I think the sort of microscope that EVs get put through, it's honestly ridiculous, right? Like if you were to use the same yardstick for petroleum, you'll suddenly realize it's not fair. Commercial vehicles in India, 10% vehicles, 70% energy. No brainer. We should be electrifying them. I don't know why FAME is not focused on that. Right? We shouldn't necessarily be subsidizing rich people to own cooler vehicles. I don't believe in the goodness of people, right? So I think when there's economics involved, the world moves, right?
Correct.
And I think there's now a strong economic incentive to recycle batteries. So, because if you look at most segments in India, we're not aesthetic conscious. We're more price conscious, life conscious, value conscious.
Okay.
Right? From that point of view, LFP and NMC are the only practical cells for the next 3 to 4 years. A lot of new cell chemistries exist in the lab, but they're probably 4 to 5 years away from being commercially viable, right? So
Hi everyone, this is Maxson Lewis, your host on Max on Mobility. And today, along with me, I have a very interesting personality. Someone who's recently raised funds, someone whom everyone in the EV space looks up to for that fun character that we have. His name is Arun Vinayak, who has traveled all the way from Bangalore to be on this podcast. So, Arun, welcome to Max on Mobility.
yeah, thanks so much, Maxon. Pleasure to be here.
It's always a pleasure to be talking to you, podcast or even otherwise. So first of all, congratulations.
Thanks so much.
So how does it feel? What's the feeling after having done a big fundraise? What's happened? What's the first thing on your mind that happened?
More money, more problems, right? Like that. But no, on a serious note, I think it's good. You get a little validation from things are going okay. Also, it's a moment to sort of sit back and sort of evaluate what's working, what's not working,
right.
What to double down on. So I think generally, last 3 years we've been building a lot of tech in stealth mode. Last year was the first year we sort of brought this out on the road. We saw a few metrics moving. So I think last year we figured out what to do, what not to do. So I think as a team we've gotten smarter. Now we have more ammunition to go scale this up. So excited.
Stealth is an understatement because 2020 is when you started, right? I saw the first pictures of you in December 2020. That's when Exponent started.
Yeah, we started in December 2020. Yeah.
And within a couple of years, not only stealth, you've been super fast on things.
Yeah, I think second time around, I think this second time we're building a company from scratch. So I think sort of really figure out what to do, what not to do.
So let's do this. Let's try and get you introduced and then Exponent introduced. There are many people who know Arun and Exponent, but there's for what I know, there's Arun much before that. So tell me about yourself, Arun. This is something I've always wanted to hear from you as well.
Oh, I love mobility. So I'm glad to be on this podcast because I think mobility has just been something I'm always excited about. Started had a cycle repair shop when I was 5, 6. Didn't really put back most of the cycles. Parents complained I had to switch that off. But since then it's been a chase of something mobility. Built my first car when I was 16 with second-hand parts and sort of really made me happy. It didn't have brakes. It was barely functional, but I think that was the moment where I said, okay, we'll chase mobility. It wasn't EV, it was mobility.
Right.
And then I think EV became this nice little platform to say, hey, everything we think about mobility is gone. Right, it's now starting afresh. So when you're 20 to 23, it was this great opportunity to say, it's once in a lifetime opportunity to say, let's build a vehicle from scratch. So that's how Ather happened, and now Exponent.
So tell us about Exponent now. First thing is Exponent. Why the name Exponent, and what do you do there, and what does the company do?
I think Exponent is what happens when you get a bunch of engineers to name a company. It's not necessarily the smartest thing, but I think. So firstly, start off by saying we will exponentially be faster in charging, right? It was just started with that. But also there's a deeper aspect of physics here. So we realize as we go faster, it's not linear, right? It's actually exponentially harder to solve problems.
Right.
When you go from 4-hour charging to 15-minute charging, current is 16 times more, but heat is 256 times more, right? Mm-hmm. It's just how physics works and so how heat works. So we realized everything we were going to solve was exponentially harder, but also exponentially beneficial to the ecosystem. And then I think there's also a power law concept, right? Which is if you do 1 or 2 things, you can actually get 80% rewards.
Right.
So we thought hey, if you can solve for rapid charging, we thought it was something that was solving for everyone's problem. Like it was solving charging station profitability. It was solving for the end users experience. It was solving for OEMs adoption. So it felt like this very heavy power law sitting there on energy. So we said, okay, if we can simplify energy, then it will exponentially unlock EVs.
But how would you, in a single line, describe Exponent of what you do at your company? Let's say one line elevator pitch.
We're a full stack energy company.
Okay.
We think energy is now two-sided, batteries plus charging. So you got to solve for both. That's what we do. We build battery tech and we support that with the best charging network or the fastest charging network. Hopefully, it'll be best one day.
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
But then, is that how you started Exponent, or is there something else you wanted to do and then you landed here? Because this is something, I mean, what I hear in the EV space largely, it's a new technology. So not everyone starts doing what he intends to do at the end. So did you really start with this in mind, or was it something else?
I think it was always going to be rapid charging. It was actually before we started Exponent for 4 to 5 months, we were just like going really deep. In fact, even when I was at Data, we were thinking about rapid charging. How do you build a platform? Quickly realized it's not two-wheelers are needed, like commercial vehicles needed. So that's when we realized we need to start a new company. So it was going to be a company for rapid charging. But our original idea was to like actually rapid charge a truck,
Right.
or a bus, right? Which we're now getting to do now. But it was just too large a problem statement to go jump into. And there were no ecosystem players, right? Like there was no one building a bus in 2020. But they were like three-wheelers, they were, last mile mobility was taking off. So we said, okay, let's start with rapid charging and last mile mobility. And then like sort of, it was a smaller bite to sort of pick up on, technology wise. Just the amount of infrastructure we needed, how much of power we needed to set up a lab. So it was a lower cost way to start. But as we sort of built it up, and now we're building a bus, for example, partnering with a bus manufacturer.
Awesome. For those of you who do not know, you should check out the Exponent Facebook page. You have a absolute timeline, right, with photographs. You can actually check it out on the Exponent.
Our website and our LinkedIn page.
Website really.
Yeah.
So good. So now, where exactly are you in this entire space of the entire fast charging, battery? So what exactly are you trying to do different than what others have always been attempting to do? I mean, everyone has always wanted to have a fast charging network and a fast charging battery. So what are you doing different?
I think the fact that we're a full stack energy company is fundamentally where we're different, right? A lot of companies focus on just chargers or just batteries, or someone's building the vehicle. You don't have control on the charging network as an experience. And I think the energy is now shifted from petroleum to EV. Like in petroleum, energy is a one-sided problem, right? Like it was just on the ground, extraction, discovery, extraction, refinement, distribution, right? And the transaction is actually fairly dumb, right? It's just a mechanical process. And your energy storage on the vehicle is just a can, right? So the way energy worked, powertrain was more important for EVs, right? For ICE in vehicles.
Right.
How do you take petroleum and convert it into power? So OEMs focus on powertrain, and energy companies focused on energy. So that decoupled ecosystem. We think that's fundamentally changed now with EV, right?
Okay.
We think upstream is solved, like energy in the wall, right? Now, how do I take energy from the wall to the vehicle, right? So that transaction is fundamentally where we think the problem is at. So you need to solve for battery tech, you need to solve for charging network, and they need to be in sync, right? I mean, unpopular opinion, we think open protocols don't work, right? Which is why we sort of build our own sort of protocol on rapid charging, which I think is very India specific, India focused. It solves a whole bunch of problems India needs solving for. It addresses the price sensitivity issues that India has. So yeah, we're very India first, building this tech for India.
But then let me put you on the spot here is, people say that you fast charge a battery and that's you're killing the battery.
Yeah.
So are you killing the batteries that you, how are you ensuring that you're not killing, if ever that's what you want to do?
Yeah, so I think and I think that comes from the previous set of how industry worked, right? Which is like a silo of charger on one side and battery on the other, where sometimes the charger is just dumping energy in the battery, right? And if you sort of get into the mechanics of a cell, the faster you charge, there's more lithium flow. Without getting too technical, so a cell has a cathode and anode. So like, if you charge, a lithium ion goes from the cathode to the anode and get absorbed. Like that's fundamentally a cell, right? Now the faster you charge, there's more lithium ions, and if you just blindly charge, you'll have a lot of lithium crowding. It's like a Bangalore traffic jam, right? So that's fundamentally what kills cells, and you need to sort of know what's happening inside a cell if you really want to go fast without breaking things, right? So it's not about just blindly dumping current on a cell. That will definitely destroy a cell. It's about figuring out when to go fast, when to take those strategic breaks. It's sort of being like a football coach, right? Like you sort of want your players going really fast, but you need to take strategic breaks, right? So you have like 100 cells, and cells are fairly dumb, right? They're cans with chemicals, right? So you and I can buy the same cell. You can get 500 cycles out of it or 5,000 cycles out of it. It's entirely based on how you manage it. So we are in that energy management game, and we're cell agnostic. That's what's unique about us. We don't get into cell design, manufacturing. We think that's a capital. I think we think large companies are better off winning that. It's not a tech problem; it's a manufacturing problem. So let everyone build cells. We'll take any cell and charge it up really quickly and make it last really long, because we fundamentally understand how, if the cell is stressed, how to manage the cell, and so we're in the energy management stack.
But then Arun, for decades, I mean, it's more than decades, people have been trying to solve this. So how did you crack this differently from others? And I know I'm going to keep coming to this question as to why were others not able to do what you have been able to do?
I think it's a question of evolution. I think if you look at cell chemistry by itself, it's evolved. Definitely the platform. So the base platform which we are playing around with has evolved. Electronics, in some sense, the learning on electronics, learning and understanding of BMS has evolved. The power electronics has evolved a lot in the last 10
So
years.
So let's go back. How is a team structured who managed to solve this so quickly? So you have a set of physicists. We
have a team that actually understands fundamentally cells. So you're a team that's just building algorithms. They don't care about anything else. They're like, if I have theoretically best hardware and theoretically best software and all control, how do I make the cell work? Right. So they're just working on electrochemistry and algorithm for electrochemistry, right? But that is just theory, right? And that actually has to work in every vehicle in the field. Right? So the cell algorithm team is building, they're building it using really expensive lab equipment. So that's like one bit of what we do. Then there's a whole hardware team that's actually building cost-effective hardware for India. Right? It's sort of like, we used to have ECG machines, and now we all have an ECG machine on our wrist because of like a smartwatch. That's a fundamental transition. Right? So rapid charging using expensive lab equipment is not something that we are the only ones who've done it. Actually, a lot of people in the world have figured out how to rapid charge regular cells using very expensive lab equipment in temperature controlled conditions. The differentiation for Exponent is we do that, but we also build our own hardware platform and we build our own network to actually deliver this on a daily basis.
But there's news about StoreDot and Neo, right? They're coming out with fast charging. So what do you have to say about that technology? How is it the same technology that they're using and you're using, or is it fundamentally different? Any comments on that?
So we're cell agnostic, right? So there are a lot of companies in the world that say, so it goes back to the whole cathode anode, right? So if while rapid charging, if your anode is getting destroyed, one solution is to say, I'll just change the anode, right? So a lot of companies focusing on anodic improvements, right? And saying, let me play with the cell itself, right? We have a lot of respect for that, but we are actually complement that. So we are exponential, right? So we amplify and multiply that effect.
Sure.
But what we're able to do is take a regular commodity cell today.
So are you saying you can just, let's say if I have a set of cells with me and I really want to kind of fast charge it, I just hand it over to you, find a solution how to get that?
Yeah, that's literally what we do. Yeah.
But then is it restricted to LFP, NMC? What is the kind of cell technology you work with?
So today, commercial economics, for me, engineering alone is pointless, right? Engineering plus economics, both have to make sense.
Right.
So we're not like a research company. We're here to actually be an energy company.
Okay.
Right? From that point of view, LFP and NMC are the only practical cells for the next 3 to 4 years. A lot of new cell chemistries exist in the lab, but they're probably 4 to 5 years away from being commercially viable, right? So we've cracked rapid charging of 15 minutes in LFP, at least on, I think, 15 different cells now. Your standard usual suspects of cells, right? And on NMC, we've actually cracked 20-minute charging as of now.
Okay, so you have both LFP and NMC.
Yeah, but India is really an LFP market, so right. So especially our focus is commercial vehicles, so it's a no-brainer for us to just go LFP heavy.
Okay, so you managed to crack LFP and NMC. What next? I mean, what would be your next this year? For example, 2024. We're starting off 2024. What is it that Exponent and Arun are going to focus on this year? You've got your tech, you've got your investments. What next?
I think this year is about 90 to 99.99. That's the internal, at least, messaging for us, right? I think as a company, when you're building 5 batteries a month, everything works. When you start building 100 batteries a month, 200 batteries a month, maybe 95% of things work. That's okay. But when you want to start building 2,000 batteries a month, you can't really hit that pedal unless you sort of streamline every bit of supply chain. Very important. I mean, we're not a software business, we're a hardcore hardware business, right? We have 600 line items that go into our battery, unique line items that go into our battery. So each of the supply, each of that component has to be perfected. Not from a technology and product point of view, but not from a production scale point of view. Last year was proving out technology and product and functional performance. Next year is just about scaling that up and hitting 99.99. Sounds boring, but it's actually
it's not boring at all.
It's actually really hard because everything that worked when you're doing 100 batteries a month stops working when you try to build 1,000 batteries a month.
So that's your biggest challenge at this point in time. So how many batteries do you do right now, and what is your plan for some maybe?
Right now we do 150 batteries a month, so we're around that. We're only doing pretty much in one city. Most of our focus on one city. We work on just one category now, which is 3-wheeler cargo. But next year, as we next 6 to 8 months, as we sort of fix our supply chain and backend, we sort of see ourselves opening up multiple front-end categories. 3-wheeler passenger, for example, is a big focus for us. In 3-wheeler passenger, it's far more randomized, right? My pickup drop is fully randomized. There's no fixed route. There's no parking. So the need for rapid charging is, they're hungrier for rapid charging. And buses. We're actually going to have a bus next year, charge in 15 minutes. So, if you're going to Bangalore, Hyderabad, we'll charge you up in 15 minutes in between. You keep going.
And we're going to look out for that. And there's this one interesting question that I have. Is there's this huge noise, rather, a lot of conversation about fire, safety and fire in the EV batteries. And now you're actually rapid charging these batteries. So aren't you adding to an already aggravated problem or so-called problem, or how are you managing that?
That's a good question actually, right? So going rapid doesn't mean you're reckless. In fact, going rapid means it's like Zen master approach. You have to be like really in control so the energy flows, right? So would you trust Lewis Hamilton to drive your car, right? You would, right? Because
he says my surname also.
Sure, always happen now, right? Because when you're going that fast, your responsiveness, your sensor, your accuracy, everything has to be at next level. Safety comes for free. Like safety is such a baseline requirement, right? When you're dumping that much energy, that little time into the battery, everything has to work really, really well. And the way you also build the stack, if something doesn't work, you stop charging, for example. That's a sort of safety interlocks, sort of loops that you build. Not because you're building it for safety, you're actually building it for performance and life.
But then Arun, what went wrong with this entire episode of fires with EV batteries? I mean, let's just go back a year. It was all over the news. EV and EV fires were like the talk of the town. Yeah. So what really went wrong there? I mean, I'm not talking from an Exponent perspective, but generally as an industry perspective, what went wrong? What's your view?
Yeah, so generally as a team, we've been building batteries for like 8 to 10 years now, and we've never actually had a battery fire because we've always had this belief of building tech and controlling the tech in-house for India, in India. And I think that's fundamentally what the problem is. And it's not a slow charging or fast charging. Every battery that caught fire was a slow charging battery, right? So it really has nothing to do with speed. A lot of people talked about summer, heat of battery. Right. So all actually not true, right? So a battery needs to hit 150 degrees plus Celsius to actually catch fire. That's only possible in something called a short circuit event, right? And there are 2-3 reasons why you can have short circuit. You could just overcharge a cell where you have internal dendrite formation or something like that, right? You have the BMS being faulty. And this all goes back to the whole point that people buy of random BMSs, usually like Google BMS, and you buy it and sort of put it on your battery. You don't understand anything about it. And then you buy Google Charger and you buy it and sort of try to make all of that work. You actually the system doesn't understand each other, right? So pretty much if you look at it statistically, 99% of the fires were batteries and chargers that were randomly sourced, not really designed and controlled.
But, so you're saying that there were companies and OEMs who were selling vehicles but did not do the basic tech or due diligence on batteries, and hence, but isn't that something, I mean, that coming from you, someone who's so knowledgeable on the battery side is a big statement. So do you think that that's where we went wrong? That's really how it is, or is there anything more to it that we have?
Yeah, I think before, and now we have AIS 156 and all of that, but before this, safety standards were decent, but I think there was a lot of trading mentality, right? I mean, there are enough OEMs that were trading and not building. I think the new sort of policies are forcing people to really stand up and start building in India. And I think, sure, there may be one or two instances here, but pretty much most OEMs that were building tech in India didn't really have any battery failure, maybe one or two, right? Which could be for other reasons, because when you're scaling up production, even a small loose bolt could cause a short circuit, right? But leaving that aside, you had a lot of companies that had repeated issues,
right?
And that was a clear case of you not controlling your tech.
Great. For those, so let's get back to this. The technology that we were talking about, and you talked about the fact that Exponent can manage both LFP and MC. But there's a lot of viewers out there who want to really understand, and they've always understood lead acid and lithium. That's the only thing. But what are these different categories of batteries, and what is this LFP, NMC, then solid state? Well, let's take it one by one. So, what's different between lead acid battery, which our forefathers were known to use, and what is lithium? How are these different?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally comes down, a battery is a cathode anode electrolyte, right? And I think lead acid or lithium ion is just a combination of different cathode anode electrolyte, right? And battery life is about managing electrodes, the anode and cathode. That's
perfect.
Fundamentally been the same. Is that with every different chemistry, you have different types of potential, you have different types of characteristics of how much energy density, which means for a kg of battery, how much energy does it give, right? Or power density, which is how much power are you able to put in and put out, right? So the big shift, obviously, from lead acid to lithium ion was when you did that shift, you had a lot of energy density and a lot more power density, right? So lead acid was here, and lithium ion was already here, right? But then since then, there have been significant improvements. So within lithium ion, there are multiple cathodes and anodes. So there's lithium iron phosphate, which is LFP, or there's nickel manganese cobalt, which is NMC. You have NCA, you have a whole bunch of things. You have LTO, right? And as you play with cathode and anode and the electrolyte, you can get different things. You can get something that lasts really, really long, but is probably really heavy and really expensive, like LTO, for example. You have something like NMC, which is far more energy dense. So it's probably the best solution for something like a cell phone or a two-wheeler, where volume and weight matters, or even passenger cars, where you really care about ergonomics, aesthetics. There is something like LFP, which of late has found a really nice, sweet little balance, where it's actually super cost efficient because it doesn't have a lot of exotic material. It's literally lithium iron phosphate, and so it's actually one of the lowest cost produced cells in the world right now.
Okay.
And it comes with fantastic life as a baseline. With respect to NMC, it is not as great an energy density, but to me, that's like, it's probably the perfect solution for India. Because if you look at most segments in India, we're not aesthetic conscious, we're more price conscious, life conscious, value conscious.
Right.
So LFP is like the perfect cell that just slots in anything in commercial vehicles, right? For example, you don't care if you add 10 kgs more or a few cubic feet more, because you're literally carrying tons, right? So, but the fact that it gives you almost 4x, 5x life, the fact that it's 30% lower in cost, it's sort of become almost the default cell for India.
And this is the lithium family, if I were to call it.
All of this lithium family.
But let's move out of the lithium family and let's talk about solid state batteries. And then, of course, the interesting piece about battery, not necessarily batteries at all, hydrogen. But let's talk about solid state. How is solid state different, and how prepared are we for a technology shift to solid state?
So solid state is basically, so when you go back to the cathode anode electrolyte, basically in solid state there's no electrolyte. Right? A large part of the degradation for lithium ion cells comes from the electrolyte degradation. So they said, just get rid of it. Right? So it has a whole bunch of advantages. What happens is suddenly it's really tight. So solid state cells have one of the highest energy densities. Right? They also come with a lot of fast charging capabilities inherently, but it also comes with other issues, because now that the whole thing is solid, a lot of expansion, contractions, you have something called tears. So the industry is still trying to solve it. I think solid state cells are probably 3 to 4 years away before they sort of reliably, repeatably can be utilized. But you'll probably see them in like space or aerospace technology,
right,
where even if it's super expensive, or even if it gives you only a few hundred cycles, weight matters so much. So that you'll probably see them adopt it first before sort of makes its way to cars.
Okay, but what next after solid state? I mean, we are already talking about solid state. So where do you see the journey of batteries going? I mean, is there a trajectory you have thought through and you kind of see, okay, over the next 10 years, this is what is going to be the battery technology, or are we stuck?
My personal opinion is it's probably not solid state. I think there are non-lithium ionic cells that are coming up, like sodium ion, for example, or aluminum ion. So each of these new types of cells has issues, but the world is solving them very quickly. And there are a lot of advantages of going with something like sodium ion from a pure cost and production standpoint, but staying liquid electrolyte.
Okay.
Right. So that seems to be a big bet a lot of companies are taking, and I think it's also context matters, right? And I think when you look at a US passenger vehicle market, right, everyone's like, oh, I want 1,000 kilometer range, right? That's my golden number, right? Because I can afford it, and I'm parking at home, I'm charging at home, right? So life's simple. So that market is chasing something very different. It's chasing energy density. If you look at India, most of us don't park at home, right? And so where will I home charge? Right? Second thing is most of us don't have the ability to own large batteries, right? So forget 1,000. I can't even afford 200 kilometer, 300 kilometer range battery. So what India needs is actually very different, and I would say other developing economies as well.
But then, are we producing batteries made for India, or are we still continuing to import? Where do you think this entire thing about made in India batteries thing, when I say cell level, is it really happening, or is it just another phrase line people are following?
I think it's happening. You're starting to see a lot of protos. We've actually tested prototypes of Indian cell manufacturers, right? But like I said, actually we made cells in India, I think 5-6 years ago, right? But it's one thing to make a cell in a lab and like I said, make 100 of them.
Yeah.
And the other thing is to actually make mass production. So like cell is actually like a manufacturing problem statement. You have $1 billion, write a check and someone will set up a cell line for you, right? So I think India's done the right thing, right? India's trying to prove demand out first, right? So FAME started with demand side incentives to say, hey, is India ready to go electric? And the answer is definitely yes, resoundingly yes. So now that that's happened, everyone's sort of rushing to sort of set up their lines. So a lot of companies very seriously investing in cell manufacturing in India, LFP mostly. So I think next 3 years from now, I think you can actually buy cells
made in India
from India.
How much really made in India, or is it still just going to be another something which has happened in the solar space? It's just like what's happening right now, just putting it together, not the real development. Are you seriously think some real hardcore R&D is happening in India on the battery side?
So again, splitting this between cell and battery, I think cell is already a commodity. Okay. It's not an R&D first problem. It's a manufacturing first problem, right? So that will happen, and I think large companies will set up cell manufacturing in India.
Any names that you have in mind? Do you want to?
I mean, the usual suspects, right? But
try some names.
No, usual suspects, right?
Okay.
And I think they'll definitely crack it because it's not rocket science, right? And I don't think it matters in the global economy today as to where you're sourcing lithium. They're all commodities that are traded globally. It's not like China actually has the lithium to make lithium ion cells. They have a lot of processing. So India will invest in that. India is investing in that to process lithium ore to the sort of material that we need to make lithium ion cells. So that's one side. When you talk about R&D, I think there's a lot of R&D happening on battery side.
Got it.
Right? Which is, okay, the cell is a commodity, but how do you make that cell work for India? Temperature management, voltage management, current management. Clearly, India needs very different technology from the rest of the world when it comes to even powertrain technology, vehicle technology, battery technology, and charging technology. So we see a lot of companies innovating on that. Maybe fall in that segment ourselves, but we have a lot of other good companies as well focusing on this. So I think you will see tweaks in the cell industry, incremental tweaks. The big focus is going to be like manufacturing and production in India, and I think you'll see, pun intended, exponential leaps in battery technology in India.
Got it. But then let's talk about some people who are not really as convinced as you are in the battery technology. I mean, for one, they say it's the same thing. You're creating you're just moving the pollution from the tailpipe to the chimney stack or during the manufacturing. What do you have to say about that? I mean, people who say that batteries are as evil or as bad as the ICE engine. So, what's your take on that?
I think we should check their bank balance as to who's lobbying for these large statements, right? I think that a lot of things that are still the last dying lobby by the petroleum industry. I think EV should have happened in 1990s, right? It's sad that it's happening now. I mean, I'm opportunistically happy that I get to be part of this, but I think now the last dying stance is, or maybe hydrogen is the answer, or maybe like EVs are bad. Like, I think the sort of microscope that EVs get put through, it's honestly ridiculous, right? Like, if you were to use the same yardstick for petroleum, you'll suddenly realize it's not fair.
But do you have some numbers around this? I mean, in terms of kilotons of CNGs in the ICE manufacturing versus a battery? Is there something? Are there some numbers? You have some numbers?
So actually, if you get down to efficiencies, right? If I actually have an engine, right, on a vehicle, my engine is only capable, because it's a variable speed engine, you're in traffic all the time, you're going to be averaging between 15 to 25% efficiency. That's about it. Right. And the other aspect is, when you have 200 million engines out there, like, how are you managing certification, whether your exhausts are in place, emissions are in place? When's the last time all of us got an emission check, right? Like, so it's harder to control that as a problem. As against, let's say, you're centrally producing energy, which can be upwards of 40% efficiency, including transmission losses, which is by itself a problem, but it's improving. It's already better, right? Because as central power plants, and I think we actually had a blog post put up a while ago, I'll sort of find that again. We already have, when you have centrally produced energy, it's already easier to treat it, manage it, and the efficiency numbers work out. And it's not just CO2, right? You also have to look at other emissions that are far more easier to manage when you actually centrally produce electricity. And that is under the assumption that everything produced is through coal or through other non-renewables. But that is also changing. If you look at India in the last 5 years, the investments behind renewables is just increasingly improving. So I think each of this is a separate problem: energy, generation, distribution, storage, application. Each of that has to be solved, and you can't be like, hey, that guy hasn't solved the problem, so I'm not going to move, right? Each layer has to be solved, and we have to solve them in parallel, because I think we're running out of time. So
no, I like the fact that you said, right, even if you're not solving everything, at least you need to assure that your piece you're solving, because there's someone else solving the other piece. And also the fact that you talked about, I really like this point, which I did not think through, was the fact that when you're centrally doing something, there's a lot more controls. And you hear about a lot of OEMs who are doing nasty things to just get their certifications out of their way. So a recent one is last week, and that continues to be. So that's a very interesting view. Trying to now shift focus from Exponent to EVs to, but before that, let me just try to make it hard for you on, you will be accused as an individual or as a company saying that you contributed to dirtying the planet few years from now because your batteries are non-recyclable, there's going to be e-waste. So how prepared is Arun and Exponent to address that problem?
Oh, there's actually a problem that's very core to us. I think the best way to recycle is not to recycle.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying the best way to recycle is not to recycle. Explain this.
In a sense, if my battery lasts 2 times longer, 3 times longer, that's the best solution.
Right.
And that's what we do. Today, if you buy a battery, it takes 3 to 4 hours to charge, and you probably get 1,500 cycle warranty. We actually give a 3,000 cycle warranty with our batteries.
Okay.
Right. So starting with, because of rapid charging, we actually put in lesser battery, so we're using lesser material, and then we make it last 2x, 3x of the industry. So that's fundamentally, for every gram of material used, how long are we keeping you going? Right. I think we already win that game hands down, and that's very important to us. When you say clean, it's not just going electric; it's the whole ecosystem.
But then again, you're just delaying the inevitable, which is there is going to be a point in time for that battery. Maybe you're using it twice as long, but then there's going to be an end to that life of battery. So
sure, and it's completely recyclable, right? So if you look at lithium-ion batteries today, every bit of that is fully salvageable back to the material level, right? And actually, there are now regulations coming in that enforce companies, including us, that we have to extract and recycle those batteries and send it back to the guys making the cells. So these are suggestions today, but they're now coming. So these regulations are going to come in. So it's actually going to be very important for anyone building a battery or anyone building a vehicle to track every battery of theirs and ensures end of life and also ensure that it gets recycled. And there's now an economic incentive. I don't believe in the goodness of people, right? So I think when there's economics involved, the world moves, right?
Correct.
And I think there's now a strong economic incentive to recycle batteries. So I think it's not wishful thinking. I think it'll actually happen.
I like to say put the same thing in a different way. Like, it's green when the color of green is also the color of money that you
Exactly,
make out of
right?
it. So and that makes a lot of things. But coming to economics now, you're making batteries, you're getting the EV ecosystem set up. Is the price parity achieved in the EV space? And if yes, and if no, whichever, are there any? Where do you think it is? You reach price parity? Where not? Where do you think? So what are the numbers looking like right now? From a
Yeah, I think TCO parity, and I think you should talk more about this than me. Looks like TCO parity was achieved a while ago, which is why companies are moving. Is TCO parity achieved because of subsidy? I think the answer is yes. And I think a lot of things need to fall in place for TCO parity to exist without subsidy. And I think the two specific layers, one is financing, the other bit is energy. Right? And we are in the energy business. A lot of companies trying to solve the financing bit for this as well. But I think beyond that, my personal view is TCO is too much math. I think large companies will make that. Like Magenta as a large org, we can make that calculated move. I think if you want everyone to go electric, I think mobility is about freedom. It's more an emotion, right? I mean, the logical thing to do is take the bus or walk, right? But then why do we all need mobility? Right? I think from there, the two aspects. One is the cost, and the other bit is just the freedom and flexibility. I think both need to be solved, and both are aggressively getting solved. Like batteries now are projected to come sub $100, right? So
what are the cost points right now, if you want to? Because there's a lot of people out there who really would want to know what was the battery prices earlier, where is it now, where do you think they are going to land? Are you seeing a trend?
Yeah, strongly. I think they were it used to be $300 a kilowatt hour, even 2015, 2016. It used to be 1,000 in 2010, I think, right? It's now come down to sub 200. You could actually get a decent battery at 150, 180 today. Decent, not great. But I think as technology is improving, you will see sub $100 batteries.
Okay. And when do you think that's going to happen?
I think next 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years. So, as a EV owner, be it as a fleet operator or as an individual, so is it time to still wait for a few days? Because here I'm taking a lot of risk. I'm taking a risk on technology. I'm taking a risk on life of battery. While we say that yes, you're stretching the life of battery. So there are so many ifs before in my buying decisions. What would you say to a person out there wanting to consider an EV for personal use?
For personal use?
Yeah.
I think, for example, if your route is specifically within the city, I think there's a no-brainer, right? I mean, if you're buying an electric scooter, for example, you were never going to take it on the highway anyway. You're probably going to do 20, 30 kilometers a day, so go for it. And I think that's true for any technology, right? And you shouldn't buy a phone. You should wait 10 more years to buy a phone. So yes, with like cell phones or laptops, EVs are going to exponentially leap every 18, 24 months. A lot of software in them, a lot of electronics. So the improvement cycles are going to be much faster than what we're used to in the IC engine world. But you also get to experience the product for 18 to 24 months ahead of everyone else. So I think that math by itself makes sense. And if you're approaching it from pure cost point of view, I think for a lot of people, you will break even in 24 months.
24 months,
right? If you're doing, depends, you can all do your math, but if you're doing 25, 30 kilometers a day, I think last time we did the math, it still makes sense for you to go electric because you can buy it, use it, 24 months later, move on to the next vehicle. And now there are good lease options. A lot of companies saying you don't need to buy it, lease it, you can return it back and upgrade. So, great options out there.
No, that's a nice thing to say. Like mobile phones, you can always wait for the next upgrade, but there's no end to it, right? And this is a moving platform right now, and there's people like you, there's people like others who are kind of building the technology. But my problem with you would be you're creating some brilliant batteries and the technology and the charging, but all of it is for fleet operations, for commercial vehicles. When do we see Exponent providing this technology for a user possibly wanting to buy a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler? I mean, not everyone is a three-wheeler or a truck owner, right?
I wish. Right? No, so important question, something we think about a lot. I come from a personal mobility background, right? But I think here, you sort of take a step back and you say, listen, I want to solve a bunch of things. First, I want to solve for sustainability. There's no point electrifying two-wheelers. Right? You've got to electrify commercial vehicles. Commercial vehicles in India, 10% vehicles, 70% energy. No brainer. We should be electrifying them. I don't know why FAME is not focused on that. Right? We shouldn't necessarily be subsidizing rich people to own cooler vehicles.
I'm going to hold on to that point of view, but yeah, go ahead.
Right. So that's one. The other aspect is, as an energy company, the question is, how do we build out the largest network in the quickest possible time, burning the least money?
Fair.
Right? And the answer to that is commercial vehicles. Right? Let's say I want to set up 100 network points in Bangalore. Charging two-wheelers would be a terrible business idea. Charging in passenger cars would be a terrible business idea. But charge like three-wheeler cargos or autos, right? It's just almost 10x more concentrated energy per user.
Are you saying that there are so many companies who are putting up charging infrastructure for, let's say, four-wheelers, for public charging? Terrible idea?
On the highways, makes sense. I don't see a lot of them doing it in the city. And also chicken egg problem, because in the city, a lot of people adopting passenger vehicles are charging at home, and a lot of people who can't charge at home don't buy passenger vehicle. I've seen this firsthand. A lot of people who like, I love this electric vehicle, but I can't buy it because I can't charge it at home. Right? Then how am I going to charge? If I have to go wait 1 hour outside every day. I mean, imagine you have to do something 1 hour every day, right? You would not do it, right? I think that's the chicken and egg that we want to solve, and we would love to solve it for passenger vehicles, but we're starting off from commercial vehicles.
So when do you think we can see Exponent in still trying to push the pedal on this one? How far are we?
Actually, when you asked how we started, in our very first deck, we said we'll electrify the highways using buses, and then we'll leverage the same network for passenger cars. It's still part of the plan. I don't know. I don't think this timeline is something we've thought through, because our head is right now is completely on commercial vehicles, but definitely not for the next 2 years. Yeah.
Let's talk about the technology of the future. We talked about the battery technology, but let's talk about this entire V2G. There's this concept of, hey, this batteries will store energy and give back. So what is this V2G that we talk about, and how far are we away from something as like this technology?
V2G technology already exists,
okay.
But I think it's one of those things where engineers got excited by something without really thinking through if it's needed, right? Like it just
engineers got excited by something without thinking through.
Right? The fundamental question of, is this product needed? Like I think, I think when I look at energy, I see it as a one-way supply chain problem. Like I said, from generation, distribution, transfer to the vehicle, and then you burn it off on the wheel, right? Suddenly saying I want to send this the other way just sounds the opposite of what everyone needs to be solving for.
Okay.
Right? And V2G again is a very European US concept, where I actually have dedicated parking to have my vehicle parked and then plugged into one point for long enough time to do energy trading on, like to sort of power my house. Again, this is not for me, like from an India specific point of view, we don't have parking spots, right? So I think in India we need small batteries, and someone will come, they'll publicly charge in 10-15 minutes and keep going. It could be swap, could be rapid charging, right? I'm not selling anyone. So I think the energy transfer problem in India is one way.
Okay.
And we need to solve for that.
But don't you think then solar was also a precursor to this V2G, where energy was being sent to the grid, back to the grid? So don't you
so if you ask me, so when I put a battery on a vehicle, it's very valuable. Every transaction is value. So I wouldn't want to spend transactions of that battery for something that I could do with a very different cost-effective solution.
Okay.
So when I say, give me a storage and battery where I don't care about weight, volume, anything, I would design the battery very differently. And the world is already designing the battery very differently.
Is it also a matter of fact that the number of cycles of the battery inside a vehicle, I would rather do it on a battery storage outside the vehicle?
Exactly. So you could, for example, I would use LTO, right, for stationary storage. There are something called flow batteries,
Right.
Very different technology.
Absolutely.
Which
Very low cost technology.
Very low cost technology, high volume, high weight. It's totally fine, right? So the cost per cycle there is far better, but you can't actually use these things for mobility, right? So, and the other problem of just how are you going to have a vehicle parked and connected for that long, right? So I think for all these reasons, I'm not a big believer of VTG. I think obviously renewables, and renewables need energy storage, but I think that technology tangent is very different than mobility.
No, I totally take your point on this one.